Hey everyone, it's Zack Beck. I just want to wish you a very happy new year because we just ended a very tumultuous year. We had a pandemic, a recession, and an intense presidential election cycle. But now vaccines are being distributed, the presidential election is done, and hopefully our economy is beginning to show signs of recovery with the market on a tear right now. So you might be in a situation right now where you're assessing the new year and wanting to know what you should do with your finances in order to achieve your long-term goals, whether that's cutting back on spending, paying down your debt, or beginning to invest into the market so you can benefit from some of these gains you're seeing in the headlines. So what I want to do in this video is break down in details the various steps you or I should take right now and the specific goals that we should set here in 2021 so we can stick to them and make sure we achieve them long term. So let's take our time, dive into the details, and jump into it right now. One of the most important things you or I should do when it comes to our personal finances is set up an emergency fund. And that is so important because if 2020 taught us anything, it was how many people are living on the edge financially and how close all of us are because of living paycheck to paycheck to falling into financial ruin. And one thing that we can do to hopefully prevent that from happening to ourselves in the future is by creating an emergency fund. And this is basically 3 to 6 months worth of your living expenses established in a way so you have access to them when it's a rainy day. Now, if you went through 2020, you already had an emergency fund established, and then you had to exhaust all of it because either you lost your job, you were furloughed, you were sick, a loved one was sick, or you had to quarantine, or whatever it might have been for you. First of all, I'm very sorry that happened because that was a very rough year that we just went through. But if you went through that process, now it's time to get back in the game and actually begin to fund your emergency fund so that you have it in place in the future. Now, if you didn't have an emergency fund going through the pandemic, you probably felt significant financial pain, either with losing some of your income or with dealing with the anxiety and stress associated with having to maintain a more risky job because you couldn't afford to not have any more income coming in. So with that being said, what I would recommend is establish an emergency fund. This could be set up as a separate savings account. This could be money that you're putting in anything that's not where you're not going to be able to easily touch it, such as your checking account. So make sure you have it set aside. If you want to put it into an interest growing account, such as a high interest savings account or a joint cash account or whatever you might want to do, there are various approaches you can take out there. Personally, I like to use Wealthfront for placing my money into my emergency fund because they have a cash account that right now yields 0.35%. That's not very high, but relative to where interest rates are, it's better than what your normal bank savings account is going to provide you with. But most importantly is not just that interest, but that you're setting up an emergency fund for yourself so you have access to it in case something happens in the future. Another important goal for you or I to set in 2021 is to pay off our debt. And right now, if you have any sort of consumer debt, whatever it might be, whether you purchased a vehicle, whether you finance a television, your appliances, or anything to that extent, do your best to pay down your debt. And the reason why I want to put this ahead of going into investments is because when you have a debt, especially if it's a high interest debt, no amount of investment you're going to place in right now is generally going to exceed the rate at which your interest is earning right now. So if you have anything that is beyond 4% interest rate for consumer debt, do everything you can to tackle that first before you jump into the market. And the reason why this is important is also psychologically. We want to get out of the cycle of paying for things with credit and actually holding on to the overall debt long term, because that negatively impacts your credit score, it negatively impacts your freedom financially to be able to allocate money where you really want to. And what I have found is once I have debt relieved off of my shoulders, it really just frees me up personally to be not as concerned about my finances, and then I'm able to plan for the future instead of trying to dig out of a hole. And there are various approaches that you can take. I would personally recommend utilizing Dave Ramsey's approach when it comes to this, and that is the debt snowball method. The debt snowball method is basically you start with your lowest amount of debt balance first, you pay that off, then you go to your next highest debt balance, and then you pay that off, and you keep going until your highest balance is paid off. For example, let's say if you finance a piece of furniture for a few $100s, you pay that off first before going to your car, which is going to be thousands of dollars. And you begin taking all of that money and attributing it towards your debt. Then once you're done with paying off your debt, make sure you say no to debt in the future, and then you can take that money and begin saving it and investing it. So it's a real good approach that you can take, and it really will make a significant difference long term. One thing to bear in mind as well when it comes to paying down debt is the importance of you can still utilize credit cards long term, you just never want to carry the balance. So I'm not here to say that don't ever use credit cards or never touch that or anything to that extent. They're not evil, but there is a psychological component to this that if you do have access to money that you do not have, you might be more tempted to purchase things that you do not want. For example, let's say if you're at the store and you see something you really like, whether it's an article of clothing or if it's a technological device and you say, hey, I want that right now, but you might not have the money to do it, but you have a credit card to pay for it, you're probably more likely to do that psychologically. So try and get out of that process. So if that means you don't have credit cards, totally good. Don't close out your accounts because you don't want to negatively affect your credit score, but just don't use those credit cards. Store them somewhere, just don't use them. But if you do use them, try and be as effective with them as possible. You can still gain some benefits and some of the different points you can earn and some of the different rewards, such as free travel, free hotels, etc. So I don't want to be bashing on credit cards, but I will bash on debt. I think debt is a really bad thing and something you or I should set in 2021 as a goal to get out of. Another important goal you or I should set in 2021 is to not only get out of debt and set up an emergency fund, but to begin actually investing into your future. And there are various approaches you can take. One thing that is important to be aware of is if you have the option of investing into a retirement account, whether that is a Roth IRA or a 401k, you want to take advantage of those tax-advantaged accounts to begin investing into the market. And if you're planning on retiring long-term, or if you want to retire long-term, know that if you utilize a Roth IRA or a 401k, you're not going to be able to effectively touch that money until you're 59 and a half years old. So if you don't want to do that, I'm not going to say you're making a bad decision. That just needs to be the best decision for yourself. You can also invest into the market through various brokerages such as Wealthfront or Betterment or Robinhood or WeBull or other things that exist out in society. But if you want to go the approach of actually beginning to invest into the market, those are effective vehicles you can utilize, specifically those two accounts, the Roth IRA and the 401k. Now, if you've already been contributing to a 401k with your employer, hopefully is matching a certain percentage to it, take your time and actually try and up your overall availability to put more money into that account. You're right now allowed to put up to $19,500 into a 401k on an annual basis. So if you're able to have a little bit more money and go into that account, I would say that's a wise approach to take, especially the benefit of compound interest over time. That is really going to aid you. When it comes to the Roth IRA, you can invest up to $6,000 every single year into that account. So if you have the means of doing so, I would recommend doing that as well. Now, overall, it's just important that if you're investing into the market, you're doing it into things that you understand. Specifically, I like to invest into what are called index funds, which is basically a broad base of companies that track the S&P 500 or the total stock market. Warren Buffett recommends that you have 90% of your investment into stocks and 10% into bonds. That's particularly the ratio that I use. So if you go through your employer to actually do your investments, they'll have a whole suite of options you can choose out there. I like utilizing Vanguard's total stock market index for my 90% and then Vanguard's 10% approach when it comes to utilizing their bond index. That's the ratio I have right now, and it works effectively. Now, if you go through something like Wealthfront, you're going to go into what's called an ETF exchange. So basically, you're going to have index funds that are going to be tailored specific to your risk tolerance. So that's usually going to be various approaches with your international markets, your national markets, but it's a lot of it going to be either into the Russell index or to the Vanguard index, etc. But if you go in that approach, it's really going to benefit you personally because you're going to be investing into your future. Now, if you want to invest in individual stocks, there are various approaches to take. Perhaps you've seen such issues like Tesla or Apple or all these different companies having banner years and you want to get a taste of that. You can do that, but just bear in mind with risk comes reward. So you're going to be taking on a bigger risk to try and get a bigger reward when it goes to investing into these big companies, but it's not a bad thing to do if you take a certain percentage of your assets and go in that direction. But just make sure that if you do so, you understand the tax implications of trying to invest and then take money out quickly out of the market, because time in the market is more important than trying to time the market. So what I would say that you should do if you're going to actually move forward and do this, just as a guy on YouTube, not as a financial professional or anything like that, just saying what I like to do is I like to make sure the majority of my investments are in index funds. I have a little bit in individual stocks. Then you can also look at other things like cryptocurrency, real estate, etc. I have different videos about those. But overall, if you want to begin the process of going into investments, then you want to look at doing so in an effective manner that's going to produce long-term results. One of the things that I find to be most valuable when it comes to allocating my finances is to try and have things as automated as possible. So I have a very automated system when it comes to paying my bills, saving my money, and investing. So I have money when it touches my checking account, then it immediately has money going into a savings account, immediately have money going to a Roth IRA, immediately have money going and paying off all of my large expenses. So I make sure everything is covered long term. And what I would say for yourself, the more automated your approach can be with your finances, the easier it is for you to stick to that goal, because you might be trying to make a New Year's resolution right now or trying to make a habitual change in your life, and it's so easy to say, I'm gonna make this big thing happen, or if you keep it really vague or not clear enough, then you're not gonna likely follow through. That's why people make their resolutions in January, and by the time February comes around, we've already kicked them off and we don't even try them anymore. But if you set up a system in place, something that is automatic where you don't have to think about it again, that is going to enable you to actually stick with it long term. Another important thing that you should do in the new year is check your credit report. Make sure that there aren't any discrepancies, any errors, so that way if you're thinking about a long-term objective such as buying a home or doing something more significant, you at least make sure that your credit score is right where it should be. And this is just a thing that you should be doing just on an ongoing basis to make sure there's never any issues associated with that. One thing I also like to do in the new year is do a subscription audit, meaning look at all the different subscriptions that you have and determine what you have that's necessary versus what you do not need anymore. Now, 2020 taught us a lot, and one of the things that we did, a lot of us needed, whether it's a Netflix account or a Hulu account or Disney Plus or whatever it might be, but you might be changing the amount of time you're spending watching television now, so you might not need one of those subscriptions, so maybe you should cancel that. Or if you're utilizing like a meal delivery service or anything else to that extent, try and assess what areas you're spending money on that aren't really necessary, because subscriptions, similar to those savings approaches I mentioned earlier, are easy to forget. So you want to make sure that if you have things that you're paying for, they're bringing value to your life and they're really worthwhile. So just think about that, maybe go through the process of looking at where you have your subscriptions and try and assess what would be better for you. There's actually an application called Truebill. I've used that before to help assess my subscriptions. That's pretty good. You could try that out if you'd like. One of the other things that's very important that all of us should be considering in the new year is reassessing our budget. Like I said previously, 2020 was a tumultuous year where we allocated finances in different places and might not have had the same level of income you had previously. So not being able to assess where those finances could go could really hurt you. But if you take the time to really consider where you're allocating your money, making sure that you're setting up an emergency fund, you're paying off all of your debt. After you pay off your debt, then you begin investing into the stock market. Make sure you're trying to maximize all your retirement accounts and then invest into investment accounts like a brokerage through Wealthfront, or if you want to purchase individual stocks, or if you want to go into crypto or whatever it might be. If you have that budget set, try and stick to it. I know that's probably the most difficult thing, but if you automate your overall process of allocating your finances, you're more likely to stick to it. Now, these are just important resolutions you want to establish, but hopefully they become habitual. It takes time to develop these sorts of habits, whether it's for fitness or for your health of eating, or whether it's spending time and allocating accordingly to your studies or anything to that extent. Similarly with finances, it's going to require daily hard work and it's going to require discipline. But if you try and do the processes necessary to make this as easy and as pain-free as possible, it's hopefully going to enable you to achieve longer-term goals. And that is my objective for you, is I really want you to have the freedom and flexibility to go and pursue your passions, to bring more life into this world, to be more engaged in our civil discourse, to be able to go and spend more time with your family, to be able to travel, to be able to enjoy this beautiful life that all of us have been given. And I view money simply as a vehicle or as a tool that we can utilize to make that happen. We shouldn't be doing all these things associated with money just to have more money, because money does not inherently bring more meaning or worth or value to your life. It's the time that it provides you with to be able to go and do those things that mean a lot to you. So I'm hopeful that these different resolutions, these different approaches that you can take in the new year will enable you to have a more fruitful and positive new year that allows you to go and achieve long-term goals while still living in the present. So that's really something that is important to me and one of the reasons why I've created this channel. So hopefully I encourage you to live with that type of balance and moderation. With all that being said, I'd like to thank you for watching the video today. If you wouldn't mind, please like the video. That would really help the channel out for the YouTube algorithm, help push this video. Other people might need to hear it. In addition, if you have any questions, please comment down below. I'd love to interact with you, do any research for you, and help answer any questions that you might have. Furthermore, if you wouldn't mind, please subscribe to the channel. That would mean a lot to myself personally, as I do everything I can to create content that will make a meaningful impact in your life by encouraging you and myself to lead lives of meaning and purpose, all while maintaining balance and moderation. And if you do subscribe to the channel, please tap the notification bell. That will notify you every time I post a video, which I do on a weekly basis. Once again, I'd like to thank you for watching the video today. I hope you have a wonderful day every day. Talk to you next time.